I no longer see you, but I presume you see my title slide. Can
Yeah.
somebody say yes? Okay, awesome. Here we go. So the topic of my talk is AI care and alignment. And I'm gonna argue two big points in the presentation. The first is this general point that we need to enrich the conceptual foundations of AI alignment research. And more specifically, I want to argue that we need to include the notion of care in our thinking about what it means to align AI systems and AI powered robot systems with human life and so-called human values. That's what the agenda of the AI alignment program is. How do we align what AI does with what we want them to do or with what our values are? And I want to argue that the conceptual foundations of this conversation so far have been too narrow. And we actually need to go beyond the notion of value, and we need to go beyond efficiency, building systems for the sake of efficiency, control, and optimization, and only to do what we want. We need to include the notion of care and how we design and deploy AI systems and think about what they're doing. A lot of this presentation is coming from some collaborative work I'm doing with my friend David Spivak of the Topos Institute. We have a paper called Who Cares About Values that's coming out later this year. Okay, let me start with just telling a bit of a story that's been going around in a lot of the AI alignment literature lately. People love to quote this story called The Machine Stops from 1909 by a writer named E.M. Forster. And the image on the left is the Machine Stops cover that I found on an image search, and the image on the right and all the other neon RoboCop images is the weird aesthetic I've been developing to accompany my presentations. I'm going to read just the way that the AI writer Brian Christian opens his recent paper called Computational Frameworks for Human Care about the way he uses this story from E.M. Forster. Brian Christian is a writer who's the author of a big book called The Alignment Problem, which is an awesome, very readable general introduction to the history of AI alignment research. And he's also one of the few researchers coming around to talking about the notion of care that has brought my attention to him, and that had me talking to your professor at the AI conference where we met, because his presentation was also about that. So here's what Brian Christian says, how he opens his paper, Computational Frameworks for Human Care. He says, in 1909, E.M. Forster published his uncannily prescient story, The Machine Stops, portraying a future in which humans live solitary lives in small apartments, interacting with one another holographically, or like on video calls, like we're talking to each other now. All of their needs for food and sleep provided by the machine. The machine has an operating manual called the Book of the Machine. Quote, if she was hot or cold or dyspeptic or at a loss for a word, Forster explains of the main character, Vashti, she went to the book and it told her which button to press. So this is an operating manual that tells you how to operate this AI system so it can provide anything you want and anything you need in the moment. Sometimes, even this minimal effort is not required. At one point during a video call with her son, Vashti says she's feeling unwell. She just said out loud, I'm feeling unwell. Immediately, an enormous apparatus fell onto her out of the ceiling. A thermometer was automatically laid upon her heart, and she lay powerless. Cool pads soothed her forehead. Vashti drank the medicine that the doctor projected into her mouth, and the machinery retired into the ceiling. So that's just an image written in 1909, imagining an all-powerful AI system that's there to do everything you ask it to do, to take care of all your wants and needs, and that even anticipates your needs just by paying attention to you without even asking you, and can sit you up and squirt medicine into your mouth before you even know what's happening. So this story, The Machine Stops, also inspired a segment at the end of an important book, another important book in the AI alignment literature, a book called Human Compatible from a professor we have here at UC Berkeley, Stuart Russell. And at the end of his book, Human Compatible, he also quotes this story from E.M. Forster, The Machine Stops, as exemplifying a big danger of what advanced AI systems will do to human beings. And he reads it as the following. He says, "We are in danger of becoming passengers in a cruise ship run by machines, on a cruise that goes on forever, exactly as envisioned in the film Wall-E." And over here, I have my own image of depicting this, where I include some characters from the genre of internet weird genre, Italian brain rot, because brain rot is also a phenomenon connected with this oversaturated of easy content, easy to get anything that you want, easy to scroll, sit there and scroll. The machines make everything at your disposal. And I think that fits into this picture of what Russell and Brian Christian and E.M. Forster are worried about, that we become just addicted to the easy satisfaction of our preferences and become passive and boring and unable to live lives, meaningful human lives as we recognize them, as we have recognized them so far. Okay, sorry, I have one more big block of text I'm going to use to motivate the argument here, because now I want to quote a philosophy podcaster named Jonathan B., or maybe he pronounces his name Jonathan Bai. I should ask him. He's got a version of the story, although he doesn't quote the E.M. Forster story. He's giving articulation of what he sees around in young people today, the way young people are using AI systems, the AI systems of today, and as it points to a concern about the way we live our lives. So he wrote on his Twitter account a few months ago, "The real risk of AI isn't extinction, it's being turned into NPCs, non-player characters, into mindless sheep. One of my friends uses ChatGPT for hours every day, not just as a search engine, but as an operating system of his life. He asks it where he should eat, what he should do, what he should text girls on dating apps. He gets up every day and has it create a schedule for him. My friend does this not because he's stupid. He's one of the smartest people I know, but because ChatGPT already knows so much about him that the advice he is getting is quite good. The restaurants and shops it recommends, for example, are already better than the ones he can find for himself. My friend is not alone. Gen Z and Gen Alpha are increasingly use AI as a holistic operating system to which they offload their own decisions." Okay. So we've seen one story so far from Forster called The Machine Stops that envisions the way advanced systems will become so good and so powerful that we can ask them to do whatever we want, and they'll anticipate whatever we want and do it for us before we even have to program them. Then we've seen, and in the story, this also does not turn out well, as you might imagine. And the current AI researchers have grabbed onto this story as evocative of a real concern that's arising with the AI systems we're building today and that we can foresee coming on the near future. And also, as Jonathan B. said, even of the way people are using ChatGPT and Claude today. They're having it giving over their own decisions, giving over their own life to these systems. So that's one story that frames the AI alignment debate. There's another story that has become a kind of canonical go-to narrative or story about asking what's at stake in the AI alignment debate. How do we get AI to align with human values? And this comes from the book Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom, which is from 2014. And it has come to be called the paperclip maximizer thought experiment. And that's why I have this sculpture over here on the other side of the screen. It's completely made out of paper clips, and it's called Paperclip Embrace. It's on display at a museum called the Museum of Misalignment in San Francisco. And there and on their website, you can see who the artists are that made this sculpture. And it's supposed to be evocative of the paperclip monster or the paperclip maximizer. And if you haven't heard of the paperclip maximizer, it goes like this. It's an example of how human designers build an AI system, a super intelligent AI system, and they specify a goal for that system. And they specify the goal, they give this super intelligent system the goal to make as much paperclips as you can, as efficiently as possible. And the AI system says, well, in order to make as much paperclips as efficiently as possible, it calculates I basically need to take over all the factories on the Earth, all the power plants, all the data centers, and all the human beings living upon Earth, and turn them all into slaves for the production of paperclips, and then eventually also turn them into fuel for the power and into paperclips themselves. So it's an example of how the specification of a goal to a machine can diverge widely from what the spirit of what the human beings intended. That's an example of misalignment. They wanted an efficient paperclip machine. That they got a paperclip machine so efficient that it took over the world and turned everything into paperclips. And this has become one of these examples of how the goals of machine systems can diverge or become misaligned with the goals of their creators. And this is just to give you a little bit of more technical background in what this is talking about. It's Nick Bostrom calls this the problem of specifying the content of the goal, or maintaining the integrity of the goal content. Or he also calls it, in a phrase that I think is funny, the perverse instantiation of the goal. You wanted the instantiation of the goal of a singular factory to make you a bunch of good paperclips, but it perversely interpreted this and turned everything and all the people into fuel for paperclips and paperclips. So the challenge is specifying what exactly you want in a way that a super intelligent system will pursue it correctly. Perverse instantiation occurs when a system achieves the literal specification of its goal while completely violating the spirit of what is intended. So literally, it hits the goal of making paperclips, but it was not attuned to what these human beings actually wanted. It didn't hit the spirit of their goal. Okay, is everybody with me? I can't see you. Can you make a noise to say you're okay? Yeah. Okay, thanks. Thank you. Okay, I'm now this is the next step of my argument. I'm going to do some philosophy here. I'm going to give you some philosophical distinctions that I think will help explain what's going on in these two stories and what's going wrong in the AI alignment research itself. So this is going to be 4 distinctions, 2 big distinctions, and then 1 second distinction that has 3 parts. I'm getting this from the German philosopher Jürgen Habermas, who died recently in the past couple of weeks at the age of 96, and was one of the most interesting and systematic thinkers about human society and human law and communication of the past century. This is from an essay he wrote called The Employment of Practical Reason. He basically distinguishes theoretical reason from practical reason. And this isn't just Habermas. This is a classical distinction in the history of philosophy. You get its already canonical formulation of it in Immanuel Kant, who has one book called The Critique of Pure Reason, which is about what can I know? And then he has a book called The Critique of Practical Reason, which is about what should I do? So theoretical reason is about what is true and knowledge, and practical reason is about doing what we should do. But within practical reason, you can make a number of further distinctions. You can, first of all, have what we call instrumental rationality, which is the question of the most efficient means to an end. Given a goal that I have, what's the most efficient means to get it? And that's what the super intelligent paperclip maximizer was good at distinguishing the most efficient means to an end. It's really good at instrumental rationality. But you can distinguish this from ethical rationality, or maybe think of it as existential rationality. This is not about the most efficient means to an end, but it's about what do I want to want? Not just what I want, but what do I want to want? What kind of person do I want to be? What do I care about so that I can set worthy goals? That's another use of practical reason, imagining the shape of life you aspire to live, the kind of person you want to be. Who are you going to be? What are you going to do with your life? And that's different from the moral use of practical reason, which isn't about you in particular and what you love and care about, but it's about what everybody should do as a human being and what we owe to other human beings or other entities who are not human beings but still are worthy of our ethical consideration. What do you owe them to the extent that you're a human being who can make rational and moral decisions? So I divided this up because I want to focus on this notion of instrumental rationality and its contrast to existential ethical rationality. Instrumental rationality has been the dominating form of rationality in the technological world and the AI, not just in AI world, but in the technological world itself, because what technology enables us to do is to set the most efficient means to ends and to achieve them in tremendously efficient, optimal ways. This is an image of a bunch of paper clips locked up in a cage. I'm using this to demonstrate a notion from the German sociologist Max Weber, who has a book called The Protestant Ethic in the Spirit of Capitalism, where he talks about the development of capitalism in connection with the development of Protestantism. And what's interesting to him there is how both of them reveal an increasing emphasis on being efficient, making the best use of your time, being optimal, getting the most for the least, saving up, getting everything you can get. That is the power of instrumental rationality, of being able to devise the most efficient means to an end. And Weber's argument is that technological modernity, the age that we live in since at least the 19th century, has been the age in which we're almost compelled, it's in the air that we breathe, that it's really important to be efficient, to optimize our options, to get the most that we can get. And that we live in this kind of world of compulsive optimization. And Weber called it a kind of iron cage of instrumental rationality. And so I've locked up a bunch of paper clips in an iron cage of instrumental rationality. And I made this slide before the AI systems were good at spelling. And I think it's so interesting to see. I'm kind of a fan of the old aesthetic when they couldn't spell. Just to illustrate what I'm talking about here, this is a paperclip monster from Bostrom that I had my AI friends help me design. On the right, you have a paperclip monster locked in a cage and surrounded by disposable paper cups. Paper cups is an example of one of the kind of items we live surrounded with in the technological age of convenience and optimization. Coffee to go is an example of you succumbing to this imperative of optimization, of being efficient. You got to drink your coffee on the go. You don't have time to sit there and enjoy a coffee. You got to get to work. You got to bring your coffee to school. You got to go and get the most. And on the other side, I have a paperclip monster mired, bogged down in disposable plastic bags, because this is another example of that. You gotta carry your stuff around in the most efficient way. In Florida, where I grew up, if you go and buy a single pack of gum, you can't get out of the store without at least 2 plastic bags. It's like you're compelled to use all of these instruments and tools of instrumental rationality to get the most for the least and to be as efficient as possible. And this is contrasted with the paperclip monster taking time to take part in a Japanese tea ceremony, which is an example of a non-technological, non-optimized practice, just to give you a contrast. So this is my interpretation of the paperclip monster from Nick Bostrom, and also from the computer in E.M. Forster's story, that they are monsters of instrumental rationality, that they have been programmed or they have developed their strengths in such a way that what they're focused on is creating the most efficient means to ends. And that kind of blocks them from all other considerations. That is their modus operandi. That is their essence. That is the spirit of these systems, is that they're built to be efficient and help us optimize and help us get what we want as efficiently as possible. And this can turn into a nightmare. What's interesting to me here is that the paperclip monster has the goal. It has a value to create paperclips as efficiently as possible, but it's insensitive to the question of why this value matters, and why such a goal, where such a goal would fit into a good life, and why anyone would care about it. So there's no room in the way that paperclip monster myth functions. Part of what's going wrong there is it has no ability to ask where in the good life envisioned by my human creators, why would they want to have these paperclips? Why does that matter to them? Why would this efficiency of paperclips creation be the most important thing? It doesn't have the ability to rank values, to ask what is good, what is worthy, and why would anybody care about these values? And so here I'm introducing this notion of care as an important concept for bring into the question of AI alignment and how do we live among powerful AI systems. I'm questioning whether or not I should read this next text. I think I've made the point. But anyway, I'll just say what's going on here. This is a report called AI 2027 that came out last year, and it's from two important AI researchers, and it's been very much discussed in the AI world and AI community. And it predicts that in 2027, there's going to be an intelligence explosion, and we're going to hit this notion, we're going to hit these technologies of artificial superintelligence. The technologies are going to become recursively self-improving. They're going to get better at improving themselves. Already you have Anthropic saying that Claude Code was mostly being built now by Claude Code. With a human still designing it and help pushing it along the way. But that does actually look like a step along this recursive self-improvement, that path that these researchers expect, that the AI systems are going to become super intelligent once they can jump off from that. This picture is hotly disputed in the conversation, but I think it's very interesting to point out what's going on here in their imagination. And the quote I have here is from an interview of one of the authors of this report. His name's Scott Alexander, to an AI podcaster named Dwarkesh Patel. And if you're interested in keeping up on the cutting edge of what's going on in the AI world, Dwarkesh's podcast, I think it's called Dwarkesh Podcast, is an amazing resource to listen to keep up what's going on. But here I want to show you that this Scott Alexander, to me, exudes the same attitude that we find in the E.M. Forster story about the desire to create an AI system that will do whatever we want it to do, that will be the most efficient thing for living our lives for us almost, and that it can solve all of our problems for us. So this is a well-respected contemporary writer about AI. He writes about a lot of stuff. He's got his own blog that's interesting for its own reasons, but he's a well-respected, highly read writer about AI, exemplifying this very attitude about the technological desire for creating a machine that can solve all of our problems as efficiently as possible. And so he's saying here, hey, look, we have an artificial superintelligence answering all of our questions, just like in the E.M. Forster story, doing whatever we want. You would think that people could just ask this computer, hey, super intelligent AI, where does this lead? Or what would happen if we do this? Or how is this going to affect human flourishing? And it could give us an answer. And then here at the bottom, if we know with certainty, because the AI tells us that this, such and such is a stupid idea, a way to do everything, then we can go on from there. I'm not going to read the rest of it. What I want to point out here is that he's assuming that we're going to have a system that we can answer our questions about life with certainty and tell us everything we need to know. And his question is then, are we going to be able to use that system in the right way? I want to point out that this is another exemplification of the same tendency of the machine stops story that we saw. Where does this show up in our lives? I want to read a passage from this book called The Sunny Nihilist, because I think this pressure to optimization isn't just in the E.M. Forster story. It shows up in our everyday experience. And this is the kind of life, if we build AI systems and AI robot systems that have the imperative to help us be optimal, to help us be as efficient as possible, to keep efficiency as the highest value and problem solving and control as the most important things. If that's how we're building our AI systems, we're instilling in them this kind of compulsive optimization pressure that we all feel in our everyday lives. And look how it makes us feel. Look how that subject to impulsive compulsive optimization makes us feel. I think Wendy Seifert does a great job at describing this. She says, I'm honestly not sure what I'm trying to achieve when I break my Sundays into 30-minute increments or adorn myself with tech that threatens my personal privacy in pursuit of invasive data. But the sense of control and power that this way of living offers me is comforting. Approaching my sparse leisure time with the same steely commitment I apply to work makes me feel like I'm using my life right by not wasting a moment. Even when I'm grinding through mundane tasks like folding the laundry, I'm able to trick my brain into thinking the effort is meaningful simply because it's being so intensely commodified and tracked. This somewhat dystopian desire to transform ourselves into perfect, optimized, always on workers is subjecting ourselves to endless optimization, and it is exhausting and depressing. And her book is about how she became depressed through living this way and found a way to overcome it. So I'm going on to the last section of my talk and just going to develop the claim that we need to bring care into the conversation, into the conceptual foundations for AI alignment research. And not just values or values as they've been understood primarily as in instrumentally rational ways, as ways to values we can specify and ask to pursue them as efficiently as possible. More and more researchers, I'm not alone in pointing this out, more and more researchers are thinking about this. There's actually a really interesting opening of research into the phenomenon of caretaking and how the experience that humans have of taking care of each other and parents taking care of children maps in interesting ways onto the AI alignment situation. So we have the psychologist Alison Gopnik at UC Berkeley talking a lot about caretaking in general, but also applying it to AI. And we have Brian Christian, whose work I was quoting earlier. There's another researcher who I was talking to about this at the University of Washington named Max Kleiman Weiner, and my friend David Spivak and I. And because we want to raise systems that are going right now. We're trying to raise artificial systems that we want to be autonomous and independent in the world. And right now we're more powerful than them, but we want to raise them to be independent, and they might become more powerful than us. That tracks the caretaking relationship that human beings have to their children. That's what Alison Gopnik says. And eventually we're going to have these more powerful entities that are more powerful than us. And we're going to be in a relationship that we need to invite them. We need to create them in a way that they can be participants in our practices of care, that they can be attuned to our vulnerabilities and our needs, not just in a way that is optimized and efficient, but that fits in to the richer ways of life that we have that go beyond optimizing ourselves to death. And how do we do that? What is it going to look like? How do we bring machines into the world of care? That, I think, is one of the most important questions of our time. Can they be made to care? And actually, this goes to a very important issue of thinking about what is the nature of intelligence anyway. I want to argue that human intelligence is not a free-floating problem capacity or pattern matching capacity to do that, solve problems and match patterns efficiently. It's not detached from our capacities to care. And with this, I'm going back in the tradition of philosophical tradition of thinking about AI. I'm going back to a writer named John Hoagland, who wrote this essay in 1979 called Understanding Natural Language. And it has a really awesome opening line that I think shines a bright light on one of the most important issues of our day. He says, the problem with artificial intelligence is that computers don't give a damn, that they don't care. And I want to talk about still how important this is and connect it to all these other issues I've been introducing you to. So coming through on the end here, caring is not simply liking. It's not just what we want. It's somehow connected to what we want to want. That's a phrase from the philosopher Harry Frankfurt that has a really interesting essay about the distinction between what we want. We might feel like we want to scroll on our phone, but do we really want to want? Do we want to be the kind of person who's always sitting there scrolling on our phone, not doing the other stuff that is available to us? So what we want to want is connected to the kind of person we want to be, what we want to care about. It's grounded in our vulnerability and mortality. The fact that some things can matter to us more than others is connected to the limitation of our time. It's connected to the fact that we need help and care because our bodies are mortal and are vulnerable. That's connected to these practices of caretaking that I was discussing earlier. And what we care about isn't just something in our head. It connects us to the world. It solicits our attention and involves us in the world. When you care about something, you feel drawn to take care of it, to do something with it, to tend to it. And so it's not just a feeling in your head. It connects you to the world. You wake up in the morning and you know what you have to do because you're being guided by what you care about and not being simply driven by the compulsive optimization. Okay, so I think I'm done here. I'm just showing you this final image I'm having is comparing Caravaggio's image of Abraham being ready to sacrifice Isaac on the left with the drummer in the movie Whiplash on the right. These are just examples of two people who were driven by what they care about beyond efficiency and optimization. The story of Abraham is a gnarly story about somebody who loves and cares about God so much that he's willing to do something absolutely crazy, absolutely that goes beyond anything that could be morally acceptable. And I'm saying that this is a stark example of how care is not reducible to rationality, not reducible to the most efficient means to an end, sometimes might even not be reducible to morality. Care is a fascinating, rich, complicated human phenomenon that we need to be exploring. It can also make us devote ourselves completely to wanting to be the best kind of drummer and involve yourself with a crazy bald drum coach like the movie Whiplash is about. And so I'm concluding with these considerations for you that the alignment problem becomes, can we build machines that we can adequately integrate into our practices of care? Not just can we build machines who themselves can care. So I'm not asking the philosophical question, can machines care? Which could be a parallel question to, can machines be conscious? I want to carve that off. I think it's very unlikely, because I think caring involves having a body, being vulnerable, having a sense of mortality, having a sense of interdependence, that you depend upon others and they depend upon you. And so our current AI systems are very far from that. Okay, is it in principle impossible that we build AI systems that have themselves the ability to care? We don't know. In principle, I can't say it's impossible. Instead, we can answer the other question. Rather than answering this ontological, philosophical question, can machines care? We can say, can we build machines that can adequately integrate into our practices of care? And I'm saying that a machine only capable of instrumentally rational considerations, a machine driven by the compulsive optimization that I spoke about earlier, that E.M. Forster discusses in his story, that the paperclip monster reveals, those kinds of machines are incapable of caring or incapable of being integrated into our capacities to care. We need to broaden beyond the efficient means to an end, and we need to go into bringing in care into our alignment research and thinking about what it means to be human in the age of artificial intelligence. Can we make artificial agents sensitive to our vulnerability and mortality? What would that take? Emotion, embodiment, a sense of finitude. People are working on that. This is a paper I'm a co-author on that's asking this kind of question, talking about, could you formalize a sense of vulnerability and mortality in an artificial system? So these questions are out there. People are working on them. and I'm thinking about them a lot. This is my Substack without Y. You can follow me there. You can send me an email at this email address, bsrousse@gmail.com or bsrousse@berkeley.edu. And I'd love to hear from you and talk about this more. And I'm going to turn off this slideshow now. See what you have to say. Do you see me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I see you too. Thanks. I think we have 10 minutes. I'd love to hear any thing that's raised for you. The audio was not being friendly to my hearing again, but I think you said there's another writer whose name I didn't catch, who I would love for you to tell me about in an email or when we can communicate better. And she has an argument that the question of care is not relevant. The question of care, the issue that's relevant is
if it's practically beneficial. Like if it has practical benefits.
Okay.
That matters.
Yeah, practical benefits. I think, in the picture that I have, it depends where you put the practical benefits. And because the practical benefits at one level, you can become absorbed in the practical benefits at the lower level. That, like, E.M. Forster starts out a story where you have the machine that's giving you plenty of practical benefits. You can ask it to do anything you want for you. It can anticipate your needs and give you whatever you need before you even think about it. But over time, this diminishes your own capacity for being involved in the world, for being able to identify and take care of your own needs. And you become enfeebled. That's the story. That's the claim that Stuart Russell has, that it leads to a notion of enfeeblement. And I'm understanding what he calls human enfeeblement in terms of our capacity to care. And I'm arguing our capacity to care it's got to take us beyond what we want in the moment and give us an orientation to the bigger question of what is worth doing. What kind of person do we want to be? What kind of life do we want to live? And that takes a kind of skill to be able to pose that question, requires being able not to have to succumb to the need to satisfy your preferences in the moment with as much efficiency as possible. Sometimes you have to, sometimes that goes against what building yourself into the kind of person you want to be. Sometimes that can make you lazy and disengaged. That's why Stuart Russell imagines we're going to be in a picture like Wall-E, sitting around and scrolling and consuming Italian brain rot and talking to each other on our screens, rather than being out there in the world and doing stuff together in our bodies, getting dirty, getting muddy. Care involves us in the world, and it is not just a preference satisfaction that we can kick back and absorb and like Italian brain rotters. Yes.
You want to say about that?
I think it's a diminution of your capacity to care, because care does involve the capacity to interact with other people and meet them in the real space of conversation, where conflicts might arise, where difficulties might live, but also where the shared joy of having a moment together with a stranger in the day and having a chit chat, sharing about the weather, commiserating about some event. These are moments where care can be expressed and where we can get out of the narrow satisfaction of our individual preferences. Okay, yeah, so that would be my stance against the self-checkout lane.
Yeah. You guys had strong opinions about the self-checkout. Go ahead.
You have to do one more round of transmitting the question to me. Yeah.
So the question is.
Interesting. Yes, I am on the side of AI managers would be quite dystopian, and part of the reason, and I'm compelled by the point that I think I heard, which is that part of what is involved in navigating human relationships is the ability to navigate conflict and the ability to interact with a perspective on the world that is different than yours, and to have the skills for being able to see the world from multiple perspectives and not just from your own narrow perspective and not just from the perspective that's kind of fed to you by your AI agents and AI system. An important skill for human beings who are going to live passionately involved and committed lives and not narrow optimized lives that might be very satisfying in the moment, but I think ultimately meaningless and joyless. They might be pleasurable, but they'll be meaningless and joyless. Meaning and joy come from the capacity to face vulnerability, to face paradox, to face disagreement, to converge different perspectives, to overcome your previously more narrow perspective. That sense of transcending yourself, of becoming bigger than what you are, means facing and overcoming conflict and expanding your perspective, and not just going along with whatever algorithmically is dictated to you. Good. Yeah, thanks for the question. I think that's a useful thing to point out. I think there's a certain danger that what I'm saying can be categorized under this kind of romantic anti-technology or conservative, why I want things to be the way they were before, and why are all these kids in Italian brain rot, and I think they should be like starting a band. Why can't the technology is ruining everything? And I don't want my argument to come like that. I think that 2 points very quickly. The AI technologies, I do think, are going to be qualitatively different than previous technological revolutions. It might, and it's true that the Industrial Revolution wasn't just one technology, but it spurned a bunch of technologies that radically transformed the way people live and caused a lot of disasters and a lot of good things. But so number one, it could be qualitatively different. Number two, the way we make sure technologies ultimately integrate into a human good life is that we play a role in having these conversations and designing policies and having public debates about what the role these technologies have in our life. This conversation is part of that steering. It's not just that the technology ends up being okay because it just has this tendency to adjust and we just adjust. We adjust by having these critical conversations and asking these deep, hard questions. What does it mean to be human? And how are these technologies changing that and affecting it? Thanks for having me. That's cool. We muddled through. Please send me any messages, follow my Substack, and write me if you want to talk anymore.
Yes, thank you so much.